Hey everybody, welcome to our Counterculture podcast for this week. I'm Josh Hill here with John Wiggins, Alex Cowan, and this week we're talking about the gospel and religious liberty, which is a big one, as is just about every other chapter in this book. I feel like I say that every week, so I almost just shouldn't say it anymore. But I'll kick it over to John, and we'll get started talking about what David Platt has to say about religious liberty.
So, the beginning of this chapter really hammers in the idea of freedom of religion and trying to kind of lay the foundation of if we believe in the gospel, if we believe in Scripture, we're going to be a people who are for everyone's ability to choose, make the choice of what religion they would like to follow, and thus, making it obvious that coercion and manipulation when it comes to religion by the government is not okay. I think that's kind of the foundation that he's starting with here, and just he's doing that by saying, we believe that everyone should have the ability to choose, if they want to follow Jesus or not, and thus that makes sense that everyone, should have that same freedom to choose about every other religion. You know what I mean? So, in every other context, that seems like the ground level that he's talking about here. Mm-hmm. He says, for example.
He starts off with the example of North Korea and the example of a place where that's the most extreme example.
Yeah.
The extreme example of what happens when there's no religious liberty.
They'll kill you for reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
That level.
Yes.
Yeah. The idea is that we don't think about this because we live in a country where this is the norm. Mm-hmm. And somewhat, for the most part, always been the case as far as the belief that people should be able to worship, freely, have freedom to worship whatever they would like. So he's kind of pitting that against he sort of pits it against the persecuted church somewhat too, by saying, the persecuted church is obviously not experiencing religious freedom in the places that they are in, and they're paying the price for that, right? And so he's sort of saying, well, in light of that, how much more so should we be advocates for religious freedom? So there's a tone of that in there as well.
Something I've been annoying Josh and John every time I come back from a Baptist Heritage class by sharing some obscure piece of Baptist heritage that I've been learning about. But this is actually interesting, and it actually fits with the topic.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So,
that's good.
Baptists have been at the forefront of religious liberty from their founding. Part of what it meant to be Baptist was the separation of church and state. And the first ever religious liberty plea for all peoples was actually made by Thomas Helwys. He was the second ever Baptist pastor, and he got killed for it. And the person who took his job, the next pastor, just sent in the same letter to King James, and King James killed him as well. And he said, "You Baptists aren't allowed to have any religious freedom." So when those guys came over to America as religious refugees, effectively, the Baptists were all about religious liberty. That they should have the ability to not be forced by the state to be Catholic or Anglican. And to do that, in Virginia, the Baptists of Virginia got together and they supported, Madison? Who was it? James Madison? Who signed the Constitution, one of the founding fathers?
James Madison was one of the many men who signed the Constitution.
So James Madison was the representative from Virginia. And he only got voted in because the Baptists voted for him. And his job was to secure religious liberty. Well, he wasn't able to do it at the signing of the Constitution. So when there was the first ever US Senate James Madison went back to the Baptists and, like a good old politician, said, if you vote for me to be the senator from Virginia, I will put an amendment to the Constitution for religious liberty. And the Baptists said, okay, we'll vote for you then. And James Madison went and proposed the First Amendment, which gave religious liberty. And it was the only time anywhere in the world that there was legislation for religious liberty. And it came from the Baptists.
Good old Baptist.
Good old Baptists.
We've
got some stuff to be ashamed of, but we do have some really good stuff to be proud of. And religious liberty is one of them.
Yeah.
And we see, Platt talks about the absence of religious liberty, right, in this beginning, talking about North Korea and, as we have talked about other places. But then we see kind of the other side of that double-edged sword in which a religion is forced on people. In North Korea, it would be a non-religion is forced on people, right? Or the religion of the politic as it stands. But go back to the conquistadors. Anytime they conquered a new country, specifically, going into Central America, South America, it was convert to Catholicism or die, right? And that's kind of the flip side of that. We have genocide either way. If you're going to force people to do something or force people not to do something, you're going to end up with a lot of blood on your hands either way.
And through history, that's just how it was.
Yeah.
And really, this religious liberty movement sort of starts at the Reformation almost. This movement towards religious liberty, and in America we saw it's quite controversial. About 10, 15 years ago, there was a mosque that was going to be built in New York City.
That was even controversial among the Baptists.
And as the Southern Baptist Convention, we actually supported it.
Yes.
Because the same law that would have stopped them building a mosque could have been used to stop people building a church.
Right.
And we said, look, religious liberty is for all religions. And if you take it away from them, you can take it away from us. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that is a little misunderstood, maybe even in Christian circles, is that we are for religious freedom, for everyone, and that gives that helps us to maintain our religious freedom by protecting the religious freedom of even people who disagree with us about Jesus and other things.
And it doesn't mean you have to agree with those people.
Sure.
Far from it. You can.
Right.
I love you, but I think you're completely wrong on that.
Sure.
But I want to believe and fight for your freedom to be able to worship that way.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The word misunderstanding is good. There's a thought process that goes on in a lot of people's heads that say, well, can't we just protect religious freedom for Christians?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is no. You can't do it. A law has not been written that has not been able to have been flipped to subsequently attack the group that it was protecting. If you don't protect
if you do that, you revert back to what it was, and there isn't a separation between church and state. The state becomes a sort of Christian institution.
Right, and sanctions whatever.
Yeah, I think the next two illustrations, even they're having to do with Christians, but I think they could also have to do with other religions too. For example, we talk about he gives two illustrations. One is the photographer who is not wanting to take pictures of a wedding that is a same-sex marriage, and then after that, you see the situation with what was the other illustration? Hobby Lobby, yeah. So the Hobby Lobby situation, where basically they were saying we're not going to, should be required to pay for things that are against our religion for our employees. So,
yeah, and that's probably where we, moving forward, are going to see this religious liberty debate pick up, because not too many people are saying, well, we don't want you to have the right to go to your church and worship or those type of things, but it's where Christians go into the workforce and meet effectively the culture of the world. Where does your liberty exist in that space? I think our culture is trying to now figure that out.
And what amount of compromise, and not compromise in our principle, and not compromise in our conviction, but what amount of compromise is reconcilable or even encourageable, not incorrigible, encourageable, I don't even know if that's a word, in order for us to be able to still be in the public square. You know what I mean? Like, how do we maintain our conviction and yet be a consistent presence in the spheres in which we are operating? Yeah. It's a constant question. Constant.
Yeah, and it's only going to be a growing one as the culture moves more and more away from a sort of Christian Judeo ethic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Platt says, you know, the photographer, right? She said no, and then she had to pay for it, right? She was, the court said violated this new Mexico Human Rights Act in the same way as if it had refused to photograph a wedding between people of different races. That was the comment there, which Platt points out, I think rightly so, that equating ethnic identity with sexual activity is problematic. And then he talks about this kind of what the final thoughts were, basically. In the smaller, more focused world, the marketplace of commerce and public accommodation, the Huguenots have to channel their conduct, not their beliefs, so as to leave space for other Americans who believe something different. This, the court said, is the price of citizenship in our country. That's a scary thought, I think, because I think that to make that statement is means that I can't refuse, in good conscience, refuse business, you know, as I see fit to do so, if it goes against my conscience to do so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're saying the cost of citizenship is your conscience.
Right.
That's the price.
Mm-hmm.
Is for you to say, I have to give this thing up that I believe in or say it's not true when I think it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. It says Elaine is free to exalt her God in church. She is not free to express her beliefs in the business she owns.
Yeah, and that's different than 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, as our culture moves more and more away from sort of a Christian ethic. Then, you know, you're free to go to Skyland Baptist Church and worship in church and sing your heart out to God in the Family Life Centre, but we just don't want to hear any of that in the workplace.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and then the other example is the Hobby Lobby one, where it seems a little different. Like it swings back a little bit in favor of free exercise, you know, of religion in that situation where this company doesn't want to purchase these things because it goes against their religious beliefs, and so they're not made to do so. They win that case. But
I think it's easy too for believers to look at situations like this and to place themselves on one side or the other. To be able to say, oh, well, this person did the right thing, and, you know, in everything that they did the right thing, the conviction was right, they handled everything the right way, the biblical way, etc., etc. I'm going to support her and stand up for the rights of businesses, which is a fine way to think. Cool. But then also, it's easy for some groups of people who are Christians to say, well, I don't know if I would have done it the right way. You know, that's that same way, you know. I may have handled it a little bit differently. Maybe if you had done this, maybe if they'd done that, wouldn't have turned out this way. Or even some people saying, well, you know, if you're afraid of what you're going to be asked to photograph, maybe don't be a photographer, you know, that kind of thing. It's easy for us to put ourselves on one side or the other of this and to look in on it and say, well, if I was doing this or that is what I would have done. But I think it can be a dangerous place of kind of putting ourselves in the judge seat of the actions of another believer, to be able to take a stand like that, and to just objectively say, this is right, this is wrong, because it's so subtle and it's so minute in the details of how everything played out, you know. Could have been Christ-like the whole time in everything that the Huguenots did. That would be great. Or it could not have, and it could have been handled incorrectly. It's just impossible for us to put ourselves in the shoes of the exact situation that they put themselves in or been in. and take a strong, unshakable stance on it, I suppose.
More and more, there will be a cost to pay. I think what that person rightly or wrongly didn't even know they were saying. It was very wise.
Mhm.
There's going to be a price, a cost. More and more for believers as we interact with the culture.
Yeah.
And we'll pay a cost that maybe our parents and grandparents didn't pay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There might be some professions that aren't open.
Yeah. It's I think it's a definite example to say, hey, like, you know, this is going to possibly cost you business because it costs you
A career that you
career, right?
Yeah.
So could come at a cost, you know, one day to Christians. I think in this situation, it's Christians saying, hey, look, like, in good conscience, this is not what I'm okay doing, you know, and that's going to become more and more.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're going to see Christians unable to do different things that have to do with work.
It's that tension, because some people, I think, take the wrong aspect, which is, well, I'm going to completely withdraw from society. Like, the pendulum's going to swing the other way, and, you know, let's go and live in the woods and have our own little commune. And then I don't need to be around any of that. Whereas, you know, as believers, we're called to be in the marketplace. We're called to be interacting with society.
Right.
It's just that it's going to carry a cost, a price.
Yeah, I think it's sad, but a lot of times too, we create our own marketplaces and we call them, well, this is the Christian marketplace, where we can do all the same things, but we don't have to worry about interacting with anyone who's going to disagree with us or attack us or, you know, anything of that nature.
Which is why I think it's important that, you know, in this situation, you don't have to be a Christian photographer to refuse that service. You know what I'm saying? Like, in the sense that, you know, that would create those little, you know what I mean? Like those situations like that, which it should be, you know, at the discretion of the business owner. It seems to me to be able to say this is against conscience or not, whether that person's a Christian or whatever, you know, religion they are. And so, but anyways, the latter part of this, he goes on to talk about dignity in disagreement.
Well, you're finding that, John. Can I just read one quote?
Yeah.
That I thought was, I mean, it's right at the end, so John, you might have had this lined up to say. So
No, it's okay.
it's just, Platt has just in one or two sentences described what we've been trying to talk about in 5 minutes. He said, moreover, in a country where our own religious liberty is increasingly limited, our suffering brothers and sisters, the persecuted church, begging us to not let the cost of following Christ in our culture silence our faith. May we not sit back and accommodate our culture in relative comfort while they stand up and counter their culture at great cost.
Oh man, why'd you stop? The next part's really great too. May we realize with them that privatized Christianity is no Christianity at all, for it is practically impossible to know Christ and not proclaim Christ, to believe His word when we read it in our homes or churches and not obey it in our communities and cities.
Yeah.
Oh, and may we remember with the great cloud of witnesses that's gone before us that while our citizenship belongs to a government, our souls belong to God. Oh,
Yeah.
you can't just, we couldn't just stop it after those two sentences.
Oh, she kept going.
Yeah, good thoughts. I don't have a whole lot left here. I mean, I think he's just saying, you know, Christianity can't be limited to,
yeah.
You know,
And if you're in the workplace and you're finding pushback against you because of your faith, remember our brothers and sisters in Christ in North Korea and Somalia, Afghanistan and Egypt and Iran who are in chains because of their faith. And, you know, remember their courage and the cost that they're paying.
That's right. Yeah, there's much to say about suffering here too. He goes on. The references, the scripture references are, we're going to talk about this one soon. The Beatitudes. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. That'll be a passage we covered not too far down the road, right? So,
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for joining us today for another episode of the Counterculture Podcast. If you have any questions or you want to talk about this any farther, we'd love to talk to you. Just send us an email. Our emails are on our website, which is new and improved in case you haven't seen it yet. Make sure you go and check it out. And until we see you again, we love you and we're praying for you.